Just on that last panel, I think what I'd take out of that as well is, and we've heard it a couple of times today, thanks a lot as we get everybody on the stage, we want to trust. The level of distrust could actually make us think that actually we're not trusting people, but we do want to trust, and we want better for ourselves and for our communities and our families. And I think the challenge that came out of that session and the hope is that we can find a way that we actually can bring all this together, a compact, a contract, some way in which civil society is actually going to agree the values and the things that are important to us in the transition. And we don't necessarily have to wait. It's not a top-down thing, and we heard that from George yesterday. This is something that's actually going to come from us and from this kind of dialogue in this room and what we take out of it when we go away back to our day jobs. So let's get started, and I have a couple of tasks which is really in a way to bring us home. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I think, what our intentions were for this program, for this Foresighting Forum, draw out some key themes, and then these people are going to be my rock in that we asked them to do a task, so they have been listening very carefully, and from each of their perspectives are going to reflect back what they've heard, what they've taken out. At the end of that, we'll do another word cloud experience. I think the question is going to be asked in a slightly different way than what's your key takeout. I think it's going to say something like, what is the thing that you're going to work on, or what is the thing that's important to you? But essentially it's driving at the same point of all the things that you've heard, of all the elements of what is the vision, or the why of it, what will it take for us to get there? Any of those things that spring to your mind will actually capture in a word cloud at the end. And then I have a special task, so I'm going to warn Rosemary so she doesn't get caught by surprise. I will ask Rosemary to come up to the stage, and we'll have an opportunity to properly thank her and recognise her for the last, I'm going to get teary, for the last few years. Sorry, that was very odd. Anyway, so for me first. And also we're not going to take Slido in this session. Feel free if you want to bash a few questions, but we're not actually going. I think I'd like to encourage you really more to reflect and think about the things that you really want to actually take away with you. So we started yesterday with the theme music for Apollo 11, the burdens and the hopes. And can I say that I think when we turned up yesterday that we probably felt more burdened than hopeful. Today I'd like to think, and it feels like, based on that last word cloud, and we've heard it repetitively, that we may leave with more hope. I even looked up the definition of hope. God knows why, I must be a Google mad person. But I like this one, which is the definition of hope is the feeling that you have is not permanent, right? In other words, this burden we're carrying around with us, it will end. But I don't want to leave it there as well. What I heard last night from George is if we want to get to 2050, if we want better in 2050, and we do, and we deserve better as a community and as individuals and for our families, then the moment is now. So this really is our Obama moment, where we actually walk out of this room and walk back into our roles and our day jobs and say, yes, we can. Now, I know it's very trite after 8 years of Obama and, we live in a Trump and Brexit world. Whether yes, we can and yes, I can resonates for you, or find another way, whether it's hashtag take action, thank you, Kelly, same kind of thing. I think it is too important. It's not going to be left to somebody else, them government, to solve it. It's going to take all of us. So for that reason, I'm hopeful. So rather than go through the program, which, as I said, I'm putting the pressure on my colleagues on the panel, I just want to point to a few key things that really were instrumental, elemental to the program that we put together for Foresighting Forum 2020. First, we wanted you to have or gain a deeper and richer understanding of what consumers are experiencing and what their expectations are, not in a superficial way, to actually really bring some new research, some new insights. We've heard that small and medium enterprise businesses say they're stuck, but we also heard, and thank you, Dale, for I'm going to use that swag thing, and I asked him to tell me and I forgot to write it down, so I won't remember what it is, but you all know it involves some great Australian swear words. But we also heard that these businesses are thinking about how they go from stuck to control, right? And we heard that households say WTP, not WTF. And they also want to think about how do they go from why should I to how can I? We expect at ECA to build on this research and for you to do the same, so that we engage in what it will take to make sure the future is better than the past. And if we can't promise and deliver better, then we won't be able to navigate the existential climate change crisis that we're facing. Second, as part of the program, we wanted you to visit 2050. I loved the fact that somebody said today, read more science fiction. In some ways, our little silent disco in there was a way of inhabiting different worlds. None of those worlds are going to eventuate quite like that. But what we wanted you to reflect on is every kind of imaginary world in a way that you brought into this room, I hope has been challenged in the last 2 days. The old imaginaries need to be challenged. The old orthodoxies need to be challenged. You need to go rogue. You need to let your mind go rogue, to think deeply about the drivers and new tools for how we're going to imagine a future. And then not only just imagine, and I pick up Alison's point about, we're forever trialling, we're forever piloting, we're forever asking consumers what do they think about demand management incentive, and I love Ben's point about treating them like slot machines. I mean, let's get real. Let's actually use some new tools, some design thinking, good social science research. I mean, it's the era, Yolandi, of the social scientists. Moving beyond quantification and econometrics and economics, which is still a social science, but to more broader methodologies that are going to help us deeply embark on this exercise of transition. And finally, we landed at a discussion about the compact, and I've already made some comments about that. So let me just catch up on my notes. Chris, you made it seem way too seamless. So as I said, what we'll do is we'll go to the speakers. So I'm briefly going to introduce them, and then I will sit down so we can actually start from there. So I'm going to do them all in one go, and I think we're speaking in the order of... Which order are we going in? Thank you, Kerry. Sorry, my brain's not working. Great, thank you. So really, I'm just going to give a brief introduction, and Kerry can add anything that I haven't added in that's important. So the critical thing is Kerry brings unique experience as a small business owner. He has been part of the process of the Independent Accountability Panel and the Charter, and we were so impressed with the contribution he made in that process that we thought, with Kerry's participation here today and with his generosity, we'd ask him to contribute his reflections. Tween Ewan is someone who has been working on a fantastic project with communities in Western Sydney called Voices for Power, with an organisation called Sydney Alliance. Some of you who are based in Sydney and others in Tasmania may have already heard Twee speak. But it's a very different model for engaging with communities around how they can take control, but also how communities have a role to play in supporting people to actually get better outcomes and solve their problems. And Ross Walmsley probably doesn't need an introduction to many of you, has been a long-term contributor in this sector as CEO of SACOS. So again, brings some very valuable perspectives to the table. So I'm just going to sit down and then we'll start with Kerry. And have you got a microphone? Yep.
Thanks very much. And just as an add-on to that, apart from being a small business owner in conjunction with my wife, I'm also the CEO of Cane Growers Mackay, so looking after our broad number of growers, which are small family businesses in their own right, as Dale does down in Bundaberg. And just a quick scenario painting for you. We are in our part of Queensland dealing with a government-owned monopoly that really has, for many years, had a far greater treasury focus than it's had as a consumer focus. So therefore, when you have a political ideology and a political imperative seeking to make money, then you have a different focus which is pushed down on the supplier. So as much as, for instance, Ergon staff will do what they can and work with what they can, there is a treasury imperative. Give you an example, over a 10-year period, there was a 136% increase in electricity charges, a 90% increase in water charges. The cane, as you may also know, over that period, of course, we probably had no more than a 24% increase in CPI. So it doesn't take long to start to do the sums that when you see that a major inputs in agriculture and small business, or to our small business people in agriculture, happens to be water and electricity, that you start to see them feeling that they are being basically a cash cow. They, across our regional economies, for every dollar in sugarcane, $6.30 is created in economic activity within the regions. So when you see a pushback on the creation of the activity, that impacts across the whole community. We're not talking about, okay, well, that's the poor farmer or the poor small business person. It has an impact on livelihoods, it has an impact on community, services, it has an impact on other small businesses. So, for instance, in a period like last year, which was dry, for irrigators, you would have seen in 10 years plus ago, same conditions, we had an 85% take-up in their water allocations to maximise productivity, which maximised inputs into the regional community. The same term last year was a 25% uptake, so productivity went down. What did it all finish up starting for us to see? That we were seeing people, and we are seeing people still, but we are trying to work with them, in that behavioural scientist realms of learned hopelessness. What's the point? Why should I bother to think about what I'm going to do, what I can and can't do? So we, for over 8 years as an organisation in Cane Growers, have been trying to reinvent the conversation, and we've done a lot with regards to, and you heard Dale yesterday, a lot of great work, and we've also been trying to bring our people, or bring people in our regions out of that sense of learned helplessness, because they see that there's no competition, there's no challenge, and there's no government change. So they're not seeing a policy shift. So what do we do? So we've worked hard with our growers in our area, different to say Dale, to try to get them to understand what their irrigation is, what their power is, where it plays, what they can actually do and can't do. We have seen a movement towards taking growers after their evaluations and our help. Some of them have moved into solar. We've put 130 systems in across the area, so we're seeing people trying to take action. But at the end of the day, they're wondering, where is this all going to end? So I think at the end of the day, energy and water are cornerstone points, pressure points and cornerstone parts of our fabric of our communities that we live in today. That is for everybody in the community, whether it be a small business, large business, or a resident. At the end of the day, for all of us in this room, we are people in the business of looking after people. That's the centre. And we need to be able to go beyond just an era of engagement and actually get an era of real participation. Energy is not a cash cow. Energy and water need to be viewed as enablers, or economic and social enablers within our society. Not and therefore treat it as part of the investment in the fabric of where we live and how we live, rather than what we're not doing. So we need to be co-involving with the providers, with the consumer. Let's get active. Participation beyond basic engagement, and let's get the affordability as the centre point, because from affordability, people can start to understand their potential and opportunities for change. If they can't afford it, nothing's going to change. They don't even want to think about it. Let's make that there. Let's make sure that we have information that is of relevance. What's in it for me is the principle around the consumer. Let's get some innovation and trust and put the consumer at the heart of what we're looking for. Let's listen and not just hear to our consumers and our communities. And I think that collaboratively, and Charter I think is a very good starting point, what are we going to do to enact and drive collaborative change, to push beyond the political ideology? So where are we going to take our place in the catalyst for change to make sure that the people are the centre of where we want to go, because with them we'll create better communities and we will have affordable progress, economic and social. Thank you.
It's fantastic. Thanks, Kerry. That's amazing. Thanks for helping me bring it home. Twee, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And I also would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. So my name is Twee Lynn Nguyen, and I'm a community organiser at the Sydney Alliance. The Sydney Alliance is a broad-based coalition of many civil society organisations, all concerned with the issue of the common good. And what issue does not, I guess the energy transition and confronting climate change is one of the biggest issues of common good that we all have to face right now. So over the last 3 years, I've had the absolute privilege of being able to work on this project called Voices for Power. And this was an exercise of building trust. It was at the heart of it. It was how do we engage and understand communities from culturally and linguistically diverse communities about their concerns on energy. And it is a recognition that these communities are often not heard or not engaged or disengaged. We don't quite understand how they experience energy, and they also experience extra barriers to being able to communicate and engage. So it's been an interesting process, and we've learned a lot about how we do it. I spent 3 years sitting in church halls, running community forums, meeting with imams, meeting with community leaders, and speaking to them about what they're hearing in their community. And then having table talks where it could be 6 people around a table to 100 people around 10 tables, talking about what is it that they're experiencing in terms of energy. And then from there, not just consulting and listening, but we brought these people back together, 150 people in our annual conferences, to really plan together, discern together, what are the commonalities here? What are the issues that we're all facing? It's not an individual issue anymore, but it's a community issue now, and how we're going to solve it together. So for me, this a major reflection I have from this Foresighting Forum is that we know the world as it is. It is, consumers are disengaged, there's a distrust in the system, and people are suffering from a lot of these pressures now in the cost of living, and also they're confronted with the impacts of climate change. But we also know that consumers have a vision for the world as it should be, that it's affordable, clean, easy to manage, simple, and inclusive. So there's how do we get to the world as it should be? It's going to be a transition. It's going to be a process, and that's where I really agree with Kerry. I agree with Cameron. Is that it's beyond consultation, beyond engagement, but is participation. How do we get consumers to participate and view them not as consumers? I want to stop using the language of that, but as partners in this process. The active partners that we can solve this question together. I don't think anyone here is saying that they have a roadmap to solve this problem. We need more and more voices in the room, and a look around, and we're not going to solve this problem today because it is really complex, but also there are some missing voices in the room. I'm thinking of, Gorbik Twee. She is a community worker working in Campsie for the last 30 years, working with Asian migrant women about understanding their rights at work and how to assert that. I'm thinking about Reverend Alamoni Tamo Piao, and I think a few people have met him. He is a reverend in Strathfield Uniting Church, and he is dealing every day with low-income households who are really struggling with the cost of energy. You've met Shaker Did through the video. He is already helping his community deal and manage with debt collectors. And there are a few more leaders in the room that I want to recognise, Michal Levy and Nirmal Joy, because without them and really gaining their trust and working together, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have the progress that we had. So I want to, I guess, end on like a call to action. Let's keep it really simple. Like, community participation can seem daunting, but it isn't really. I want to invite everyone here to come to, let's do a forum like this, but in Mount Druitt, maybe Plumpton Neighbourhood Centre, hosted by Shaker Did and the Muhajirin Association. Let's have community members sitting in our own room, diverse community members from the Filipino community, from the local church, from the Muslim community, the Pacific communities, from the Sikh communities, sitting around, maybe with a CEO of an energy business, maybe with some regulators, maybe a few other policymakers, and let's talk about what is it that we can do together. Let's take this energy compact and let's take it out to Mount Druitt. Let's start there, but then maybe we can go to Mackay. We can go to, Rockhampton, we can go to Newcastle and the Hunter and have conversations with the communities there. So let's get to work.
Great call to action. Okay, Ross.
We do need to turn them on, leave them turned on so they can turn it on for us. Thank you. Look, I'm going to take a slightly different angle and, in a sense, try and go back to the incredibly rich material that I think we've had available to us over the last kind of 24 hours. And it'll be a bit of a rave, and some of it will be a bit random, so you might have to talk to me later about the things that I'm not clear about. Some of them might take a long time to discuss. So the starting point is thinking about energy services only exist in the context of a community, and it's reasonable to expect them to have a responsibility to contribute positively to our community as a citizen. They do have a responsibility to both do no harm and, better still, make lives better. We will, as community members, do lots of things if we understand how it will benefit us and how it might benefit our community. So the idea that change is possible has to be front and centre. We just need to be engaged in understanding why and how it might work. What if we can agree where we're needing to go? There's no doubt that we need to continue the consensus building strategy. And I think the really interesting thing about the discussion yesterday around the energy charter and some of the conversation that was happening there with some of the CEs is that, in fact, what's going on there is some consensus building, some attempts to get people to agree about what the really important stuff is. And of course, this has been a terrific exercise in reminding us and bringing us together to continue that conversation about what the really important stuff is. Now, the stuff is different in this room to what it is in the energy charter room, but it's still really important for us to understand how important consensus is. And I suppose I was struck by George's presentation last night in terms of what we are facing is potentially continuing politics of division, continuing politics of exploiting the cracks in our community in an effort to divide us and conquer, when in fact it's now more than ever that we need to put the broad citizens' interests at the front of our minds. particularly in the energy sector. And obviously we can't rely on politics to help deliver that leadership. So we are going to need to do that work ourselves. We are going to need our community leaders to stand up in all the positions, and we're going to need little people to stand up, and we're going to need big people to stand up and call for some real clarity. If you want to have a really interesting exploration of consensus building, go look at the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Go listen to Rachel Perkins talk through in her Boyer lectures around the amount of consensus building that has gone on in Aboriginal community over hundreds of years now to build a sense of what's important. And imagine, you know, they were charged. Here were 300-400 people representing communities from and nations from all over Australia who were charged with coming up with some sort of statement that would deliver a really important message to the nation. And they did it in a series of days, and they came out with this really short statement. And I kept on thinking, if it had been a bunch of us in the room, imagine the bloody report. You know? So there is great leadership there. The other thing is that we're not living in a monoculture. And frankly, we never have. It never was. Most of us, and I put myself in this class, arrived as colonists. But of course there were nation states all over Australia when we arrived here. And the issues of division and the isms promote division in all sorts of ways have to be confronted. The issues of racism have to be confronted. It hurts us as a community. Diversity is who we are and who we will be in future. We all benefit if we work to include. And it's not the job of people who are excluded to be responsible for getting included. That's our job. We're the ones that have to do the hard yards about working out how to make sure that everybody's got a spot at the table. Now, having said that, I want to say, when it comes to energy, why is it always my problem? Why should consumers have to take responsibility for protecting our own interests? Don't good services work hard to understand and solve the concerns of the people they assist? Don't good services understand the diversity of the people they assist? Aren't they the experts? Aren't our regulators our protectors? Why is it always left to us to actually do the hard and heavy lifting? And for those of us that are here involved in the consumer advocacy movement, there's some real questions that I think emerge from the discussions that are about, well, what's the most important way to use the very precious time and resources and wisdom we've got available to us? Is it in regulatory participation? Is it in consumer representation? Is it in campaigning for change that drives toward our vision of a fair, just community where our wealth is shared with all? Thanks.
Thanks, Ross. Well, get my words out. Thanks to all three of you. Those are very deeply thoughtful reflections, and what we're all appreciative, if I can speak on behalf of the whole Energy Consumers Australia team, is it's always great to finish a forum like this with that kind of insight, but also very much a call to action. So I'm hoping my techie team are going to start opening the word cloud and people have a chance to even contribute their thoughts to that. So while you do that, what I'm going to do is, if I'm going to ask us to move along the stage and invite Virginia Hickey, who's a member of our board, to come up, and Rosemary as well. Keep going right along. This is the seat shuffle. And Craig Memory, if you'd also come, thank you. That would be great.
That's your new one.
Take a seat, Rosemary. And Virginia, if you want to take the microphone there, and I'll just finish another couple of tasks. I must say, I'm just going to go and have to have cataract surgery because this business of sort of keep swapping out glasses is driving me nuts. But anyway, there you go. So first of all, before I go to this next very important part for us of today, I've just got one more task and then we'll do that. So first of all, I want to thank the chairs and the speakers at this forum. We impose on our friends. We make new friends deliberately to impose on them because we think they're brilliant. And you know, Alison Rowe, you take the cake for coming instead to this and not to Queen. So on that sense, I think the speakers and the chairs for the last 2 days have really been the best rock stars. So thank you very much, and thanks everybody for recognising that. I'd also like to say thank you to all of you. ECA couldn't do this kind of thing without the willingness and enthusiasm and contribution and open mind that all of you bring to this task. It's really been an amazing level of engagement these 2 days. I probably should stop using the same cliched words. Maybe I'll go to breathtaking, that'll be a change. But I've learnt there's been so many magic moments, like I literally can't process them all, like treating consumers as slot machines, Peak app, Dale, you get to say swag a couple of times. And that's just today. Like, they just kept coming. It's been really quite phenomenal to have so many thoughts and ideas and magic ways of thinking, new thinking. I'd also then like to, before I thank everyone else, recognise Chris Alexander. He's the person, where has he gone? Who, thank you. Who's really driven us, driven the program, driven the research, put it together, created this experience for us all. I think he's probably both NASA and driving the mission to the moon. It's really been a year-long effort, so we don't get to where we got to today without significant commitment. So thank you, Chris, and for everybody for doing it. Normally what we do is sort of say thank you to staff, but again, this is our 5th Foresighting Forum, and people keep showing up and being willing to do it again every year, so I'd really actually like to call people out by name as well. So we have 2 Elizabeths, so I'd like to thank both of you, Helen, Kim, Aaron, Linda and Angela, who really drive a lot of the logistics and deal with all the messiness that comes with getting an event like this to work. Thanks to Ronald, Phil and Anthony, and our photographer who keeps turning up year after year and doing some amazing photographs. Sorry for everybody. In terms of the various sessions, people take responsibility for really making sure they work, so we can have a grand plan and conceive of how it's all going to work. But they're they're the ones who sit down with the speakers and the chairs and really actually make it work. So I apologise to them and Chris, and I'll do it on Chris's behalf as well, for every mad idea we've ever had that makes it really hard for you to actually succeed. But you've done it despite our crazy thinking. So thanks, Shelley, Kerry, Jim, David, and Louise, and I'm really struggling now to read my writing. So last thing, thank you, Ross. Yes, say thank you, everybody. Thank you to the staff. As it is the 5th one, some of you are veterans. We'll probably actually have to strike up a medal next year for people who've sort of come for the 6th. It will be really helpful, and we're going to be thoughtful about how we ask for your feedback. We will try and do fewer questions rather than more. But I think if you really can think about the things that have made this forum a particular success, we'd like to do more of it and do less of the things that perhaps don't work, or less of the things that irritate you. So we will be sending out SurveyMonkey after we've had a couple of days to catch up on other work and maybe have a bit of a break next week. So we'll be sending that out. So with all of that, I'm going to hand over to Virginia. Virginia is one of our board members.